Well, I'm not going to go into each individual cover that you did, but I would like to talk about the bands you covered or what influence they had on you, because I think, you know, the interesting thing about Onslaught and what really makes the band unique for me. If you listen to a lot of the other thrash bands at the time, the Bay Area bands, maybe a lot of the German heavy metal bands and the bands from Europe and stuff, like everyone talks about Sodom and Creator and all these bands, and they had a little more heavy metal, straight ahead classic heavy metal sound, a classic heavy metal sound to their music. Onslaught has kind of had a little more of the punk edge to their music. Like when I go and listen to, say, the first song off of Generation Antichrist, I can hear
Oh,
that
yeah.
in your music. And then when you look at the covers, who do you have on there? You have Motorhead, you have Discharge, The Exploited, Dead Kennedys, things like that. So a lot of these punk covers like Discharge and the Exploited and the Dead Kennedys, and these punk bands, how big of an influence, because I know that was very big in Britain, in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
How much influence did these bands have on you? Why did you choose those specific songs from a lot of these punk bands that were out that influenced your music?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up on. I was into punk music from
Mhm.
like 12 years old. First punk album I bought was Sex Pistols the day it was released, and that was like the biggest eye opener for me probably in my life. I was listening to kind of stuff like T-Rex, The Sweet, and David Bowie, and
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of Queen, maybe back in those days. And then all of a sudden, this album came out of nowhere, and it was just like, what the fuck is this? This is like mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing at the time, because there was nothing even ever close to being sounding like that record.
Yeah.
It changed my life musically from there on, and it was like I got into punk massively after that. Then the second wave came, which was even more aggressive and angry than the Pistols and the Damned and the Clash. They were kind of political, but this had a lot of anger when the second wave came with Discharge and The Exploited and
Yeah.
things like that. And that really, because I was like kind of getting to that rebellious age then, when that really meant a lot to me personally as well.
Yeah.
So that was a massive influence on the band, and I used to follow those bands around with Paul, who I formed the band with. We used to follow Discharge, Exploited, GBH all over the UK. We got to know them. We used to get on the guest list for shows. We used to travel everywhere by whatever means, just to see these bands. And that was the influence to start a band for us. Like, well,
Sure.
we're following these bands over, let's make our own one, which is exactly what we did.
Well, it's interesting because when I look at the list of bands, all the thrash bands out there pretty much have that same list. You
Yeah.
kind of have a little more of the punk edge. The one band, what's really funny? The one band everybody universally loves in the thrash metal world is Motorhead. And that's
Yeah.
actually the first, and it's actually one of my favorite bands ever. What kind of influence did a guy like Lemmy and that band have on you? You picked the song Iron Fist, which I think is cool because, you don't really see people cover that song too often. And I'm curious why you picked that specific song.
Well, the kind of Motorhead story started obviously when we used to go to our youth club, because we used to have to bully the DJ to play like all this punk music. So he'd play like 15 minutes of punk music or 20 minutes of punk music just to keep us quiet, in amongst all the disco and pop kind of music he had to play. But I remember the single Motorhead coming out, and it was like punk as fuck in a way, and obviously inspired bands like Discharge, and it kind of turned full circle.
Sure.
And they just had that raw punky edge, but a lot of melody in there. And once we started relearning the Power from Hell album to play live, I didn't realize how much influence Motorhead had on the songwriting. You may not notice it, or the fans may not notice it too much, but when I started playing all this stuff, listening to the key changes, I thought, wow, that's real kind of Motorhead, like key change there, or little bits of that. And I was like, wow, I surprised it was like maybe some subconscious influence, but it was like really there quite a lot, because there's some really kind of rock and rolly key changes in Power from Hell. Not that you think about it, but I could hear the Motorhead influence very strong in that.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but the Iron Fist thing is a different story altogether. I mean, I've learned No Sleep from Hammersmith album helped me and my guitar player massively. I just love that album so much. It had such a great vibe, more so than their studio albums. Had a great sound on it. And I learned that album from start to finish, solos, everything, and it really helped me improve my playing doing all that. But when we were fortunate enough to go on tour with them in Europe on the Orgasmatron tour, it was 86 or 87, and Filthy had just come back in the band, so it was really special for us, like to have him there as well. But we arrived at the first date where we joined the tour was in Zurich in Switzerland, and we just rolled up at the venue just as they were about to sound check. And we walked in, we just stood by the desk. The other guys came out and they were waiting for Lemmy to appear. Like, even at sound check, he was so cool. Like he came out, grabbed his bass off the tech, like, and just stamped his foot on the floor 4 times, and they just crashed into Iron Fist for sound check. And it was like, fuck! It was like pinned to the back wall, man. I'd never heard nothing like it at the time. It was like so fucking loud and so powerful. It was just absolutely blew us all away. It was like we just looked at each other, it's like, what the fuck is this? And that memory sticks in my head for forever, you know. Such a great song as well. So that's why we included that, because it was just they were so good to us, and that song had to be included just for that memory, you know.
Yeah. And then you did a Judas Priest cover on here, and it is a song that I cannot remember. I don't think I've ever heard a band cover it. I could be wrong, but you picked Freewheel Burning. Now, a lot of people pick a lot of other different Judas Priest covers to play. You guys decided to play that specific song, first song off of Defenders of the Faith, which is an interesting cover, because a lot of people would cover The Sentinel, for example, or, you know, maybe a different song off that album, but you picked Freewheel Burning. I'm interested to hear your story behind that.
That was down to me again, and my pursuit of becoming a more proficient guitarist, you know. Mm-hmm. I heard that track for the first time, and I just loved the vibe of it. I loved the aggression of it and the power, and the solo coming. I thought, wow, this is absolutely incredible. So I'd learned all the Motorhead stuff off there, which is kind of a different level to Priest in terms of guitar solos. I mean,
right.
Motorhead, very rock and roll bluesy type solos, and then the solo on Freewheel Burning is a lot more full on metal type shredding stuff, you know.
Sure.
I thought I got to learn this solo. I have to learn this solo. So I think it took me a fucking long time. Basically, I even slowed the record down at the beginning just to get the notes and get the phrasing and what's going on before I could speed it back up and jam along with it, you know. Yeah. I nailed it in the end. It took me a long time, but I was so chuffed when I actually nailed it and I've got this, and it improved and taught me a lot of things about playing lead guitar at the time. So that's why that track was included on the album. Plus, it was my favorite Priest track, and it still is.
I'll be honest with you, it's probably close to being my favorite Priest album, but I was actually surprised when I saw that as a cover. Just because it's not a typical song people would probably cover by that, even though it's very good.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. But it learned loads for me. It improved my playing no end, and taught me all sorts of different things about soloing. So
yeah. Well, and I'll ask you one more question about the covers before I get into my next set of questions. I'm going to ask you. You have Black Sabbath, War Pigs, obvious choice. I mean, probably the most influential band in metal. What impact? Everybody has a different story of how Black Sabbath influenced them. Some people, will even talk about the Dio years. Some people will talk about the first couple albums. For you, why War Pigs? Very common song for people to typically cover, but what's your what's your story behind that track?
I think it's just got a unique vibe about the song, but it was the lyrics that really grabbed me,
Yeah.
Being that kind of ilk of a song, it was very relevant lyrically, and the music when I first heard it was almost secondary. But then once you see beyond, I was listening to the lyrics and see beyond that, and then it's an incredible song. It's not the most energetic Sabbath song, not the most lively or aggressive song, but it just got something very dark about it. And we used to jam it at rehearsal a lot, just because it was so cool, it's not intricate, it's not going to improve our playing a great deal, but it was just a song that had that vibe. It was so heavy and powerful, and like I said, the lyrics just were incredible. So we have took it up a notch or two in tempo wise, just to give it a bit more of a, say, thrashy feel, but it certainly brings it to life a lot more. And I just that was it. The lyrics sold it for me straight away.
Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.